Oh, okay. You want to go ahead and start and he can just come in? We'll try this again. We'll convene the Selma City Council special meeting February 26, 2021 at 3:02 p.m. The teleconference phone number is 1301-715-8592. The ID is 854-4933-5660, password 1893. When on the phone, if you wish to address council during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 to raise hand and we will select you from the meeting queue. Press *6 to unmute and mute yourself. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with Executive Order N2920 from the governor, which allows a local legislative body to hold public meetings via teleconferencing and to make public meetings accessible telephonically or otherwise electronically to all members of the public seeking to observe and to address the local legislative body. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Guerra.
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro.
Here.
Councilmember Trujillo.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho.
Here.
Mayor Robertson.
Here. Potential conflicts of interest. Any council member who has a potential conflict of interest may announce the item now and recuse themselves from voting or discussing on the matter. Oral communications. Notice to the public during public comments, if you wish to address the city council under government code section 54954.3a, you may only address the city council concerning any item that has been described in the notice for the special meeting. Members of the public shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Do we have any oral communications today?
I see we have a list of participants and we do have people here. As a reminder, I just want to let everyone know to please press *9 to raise your hand. We will select you from the meeting queue. Do we have anyone wishing to speak at this time?
And also as a note, we will open it up for open communications after the presentations are given.
Mayor Robertson, I do not see anyone raising their virtual hand at this time.
Thank you for that. With that, we'll move on to workshop regular business, presentation, discussion, and direction regarding development, traffic circulation, and future funding opportunities in the northwest area of Selma. Thank you everyone for coming today. I thought before we kick this off, since we've got a number of guests and guest speakers today, I thought we would all introduce ourselves. We'll start here in the council chambers with me. I'm Scott Robertson, Mayor of City Selma.
Councilmember Sarah Guerra.
City Manager.
Mayor Pro Tem Beverly Cho.
We're going to go in the chambers and then we'll go to Zoom.
Teresa Gallivan, City Manager.
Isaac Moreno, Assistant City Manager.
Fernando Santillan, Community Development Director.
Kelly Lewison, Selma Automall.
Kevin Murray, Selma Automall, representing Dwight Nelson, who was unable to make it today.
And Chief. Great. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Beverly Cho.
Councilmember John Trujillo.
Councilmember Blanca Mendoza Navarro.
Who else is on Zoom?
City Engineer Daniel Bond.
City Planner Kira Noguera.
Michael Kirshner, Recreation and Community Services Director.
I'm Michael Navarro, the Deputy District Director for Planning here in District 6, Fresno.
David Padilla, Senior Transportation Planner with Caltrans District 6.
Looks like that's everybody. Thank you everyone for attending today on a Friday afternoon. This is a very important topic, traffic circulation in Selma, very important to our future. And with that, we'll kick it off with the report by our City Manager, Teresa Gallivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We do appreciate all our partners being here and participating in this process. It is a workshop. This workshop actually came out of a council request when we were having a workshop on the Mountain View Avenue interchange. The city council then said, let's have the same discussion and the same type of format. about Dinuba and Floral, and we've had developers also expressing interest in talking about traffic circulation in the area regarding Stillman Avenue. And so there are a number of areas that we have development concerns and traffic circulation discussion priorities. So I'll kick this off to Isaac Moreno, who has been assembling the group and the team for the presentation. And again, appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you. Just want to start first off by thanking our partners and the developers and the community for coming to this meeting. I think it's important that we all kind of have feedback and join in this conversation. It is a good open conversation for we're all looking to the future and how city is going to grow. So thank you for attending. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, today's presentation and discussion and direction regarding development, traffic circulation, future funding opportunities in the northwest area of Selma. So the topics of discussion today are going to be general plan of the northwest area, land and use designations, circulation elements. We'll then move on to Dinuba interchange, the SR, which is State Route 99, Dinuba traffic analysis feasibility study. Again, we'll move on to Floral, and then we'll transfer on to Caltrans and get their next steps and feedback. And then if Tony's able to join, we'll have COG just discuss the RTP and other potential funding sources. So at this time, I'd actually like to turn it on to our city planner, Kira.
Sorry to interrupt, Isaac, but Tony's just contacted me. He's trying to get on board, but I think he needs some assistance. I don't know.
We can see him now.
I think he's trying to reach you. Oh, okay, we're good. Thanks. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Welcome,
you,
Tony.
Isaac.
Thanks for coming, Tony. Welcome. Thank you, Kira.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Kira Noguera, the city planner for Selma. And I just wanted to give a brief overview of what the general plan has said about this area for development in the future. As you could see by the previous slide, much of the area that we're talking about this evening is actually not within our current city limits. So as it stands, we have a small triangle of, as long as we're talking about west of 99 and north of Floral, we have a small triangle of regional commercial land that is within our city limits. And the Rockwell Pond area, but otherwise this is all planned for future development. So some of the land use designations that have been assigned to this area in the most northern westernly area, this magenta type purple color is known as Business Park Reserve. And I'm sorry, I can't get to my, just one second, I'm changing my view on my screen here. So the Business Park Reserve is intended to provide for development of campus type office developments that utilize substantial landscaping and innovative architectural designs. The parking areas would typically be screened from the street and the sites would provide amenities for employees. Some commercial uses such as restaurants and daycares would also be permitted in order to serve the employees of those areas. The lighter purple that's shown adjacent to 99 is designated for regional commercial, and this designation is designed to provide development opportunities for those uses that attract customers from well outside the city of Selma, given regional. To fulfill the role as a regional commercial provider, such development must be close to major transportation links and contain sufficient area to provide adequate facilities and parking. Regional uses have anchor tenants with market areas generally covering at least a 15-mile radius, such as larger durable good retail stores and vehicle sales. The more western area that includes the airport is designated for industrial uses, both light and heavy. I think everyone's pretty familiar with what we would expect of industrial development. Assembly, fabrication, food processing. It could include intense manufacturing and fabrication. And these uses typically require large properties and access to rail and highway transportation for the receipt and shipment of materials. The lighter green and true green area is what we all know as Rockwell Pond. That's designated for public facilities and park and open space. And at this point in time, generally serves as a ponding basin. We have more commercial, as we're moving south, we have more regional commercial that we've already talked about. And then south of Floral, there is some designation for the brown is going to be residential reserve. And then the lighter beige and yellow colors are medium and medium low density residential development. And a quick note about the reserve. So business park reserve, residential reserve in these two cases. The general plan has specific policies about when the reserve land would be brought into the city. And that is when 80% of existing land designated for that type of development has already been developed or has approved entitlements. And then once that land is annexed and brought into the city, it receives a new general plan designation that would be more appropriate. So the word reserve, for instance, would be dropped. So that residential reserve could become any number of residential uses, for instance, and the business park could change to other industrial or commercial or office uses. But those are meant to be developed in the distant future, not the near future. I think that's all I have on the planned land uses for this area. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kira. The residential reserve, what is it right now? What's the brown area right now?
It is vacant.
Vacant.
It could include some rural residential, agriculture, but it's not within our city limits. So we haven't had any power or discretion over the development that's happened there.
So if somebody wanted to develop there and annex it to LAFCO, would there be a problem annexing it because it's of the general plan designation right now?
I would have to do some math calculations. Our GIS group would probably be helpful with that in determining what areas of our land use that is already designated for residential has been developed or approved for development. It also, the general plan also states that it wouldn't be allowed to come in within the city until after 5 years from the general plan was adopted, but that's already passed. So it would just be a matter of where we stand with current residential development and whether we need to bring in that reserve land.
And that's 80%? Is that percentage 80% within the city?
That's what the policy in the general plan says, yes. And then also LAFCO would generally not allow any sort of leapfrog development. So we would need to annex a little bit of land between that property and the city limits.
Got it. You're saying there would be an island. Okay.
Right. So
I
for
have a
instance,
question.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, council member. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Kira, I just have a quick question. Is there any plan here for a future new school?
A new school could be developed in a number of these land uses. It's not specifically designated. So sometimes public facilities would be designated for a school, but our general plan specifically states that a school can be allowed in a number of other zones. So for instance, in a residential zone, if the school district happened to own land or had the option to purchase land, then they would be free to do so. I haven't reviewed the school district's future plans, so I don't know of any. Maybe someone else at the city might have more information than I do. But I would say that our general plan and our zoning code wouldn't preclude them from developing a new school in a number of these areas. Probably not the industrial zone, but most of the other ones would accommodate a school.
Does anyone else have any questions for Kira's presentation? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kira. We'll go ahead and move on to our next segment, which is circulation element. And we'll go ahead and hand it over to our city engineer, Dan Bond.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman, and all the guests. This particular slide depicts our current circulation element with the classifications of the major roadways in this portion of the city. The classifications we have are arterial, collector, expressway, freeway, local, and then super arterial. The streets that we're looking at really in this area, primarily we've got Floral, DeWolf, and Stillman as the primary roads impacted by this portion of the city. Generally speaking, arterials are streets on 1 mile centers, and then collectors are at the half-mile points in between those. Collectors are generally collecting traffic to funnel them to the arterials, so that the arterials can then carry vehicles onto either expressways or freeways. Local streets are, again, pretty self-explanatory. Those are generally residential streets or small commercial areas with local streets serving offices and things of that nature. Super arterial, I don't believe we actually have any super arterial in the city. In this case, Floral Avenue is an arterial. Stillman would be a collector, and DeWolf would be a collector. So if we can move on to the next slide, please.
Actually, Dan, I think Stillman's actually identified as a local.
Is it local? I can't see it at this scale. I probably don't have my glasses, but
Floral's an arterial, and Stillman would be a local.
Stillman would be local. Okay, that's so. Looking at the circulation element, these are the cross sections that are pulled directly from the general plan, and these are the cross sections designated for each of the various road types. And you can see with the we've got arterial and major arterial, and in both cases they include a median island as well as trail space on one or both sides. There is some flexibility in each of these, in that we can shrink or increase those based on the uses and such. We don't necessarily have to have trails on both sides of any one road and so forth. And then the collectors and minor collectors, you see that there are no median islands, and the cross sections shrink down from there. Then you get into the local streets, and they're much narrower and meant for slower traffic and traffic calming. As an example, we've had recent proposals for development on Floral, and prior to processing parcel map, we looked at the geometry of the existing roadways and how they would project to the west, and worked with the arterial cross section and the developer to find a appropriate cross section that would work and transition into our existing streets. So we are using these cross sections and circulation element as part of our planning and as proposals come in. I think that's all I have on this slide.
Are there any questions for our city engineer on that section?
Just one. In your experience, Dan, are more arterials or less better for a city of, say, our size? Does more arterials, does that indicate more commercial traffic? Does it indicate anything? What is there a ratio to have of arterials to locals and collectors?
Again, I don't know there's a specific ratio. Generally speaking, what I've seen in cities like Fresno and others in the area, the arterials, generally speaking, will be on, say, 1 foot interval. I keep saying feet, 1 mile intervals, and then the collectors would go to the half mile, with the concept that local streets feed into the collectors feed into the arterials. So it's hard to say there's any real rule of thumb. Selma can be a little bit difficult to apply a rule of thumb, especially with it split down the middle with Highway 99. We do have a lot of difficulty in moving traffic from one side of the freeway to the other. So I think I would be more concerned with finding means to allow for better east-west traffic circulation than I would be worried about how many arterials we have versus how many collectors.
Does anybody else have any questions for Dan at this point in his presentation?
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. We'll go ahead and move on. So the next topic of discussion we'll have is for Dinuba and 99 interchange. To discuss this topic, what we'll be doing is actually moving into a report and diving into it a little bit and giving some analysis and what we find in the report from the State Route 99 and Dinuba Avenue traffic analysis feasibility study that was done in July of 2017. So this traffic analysis is a technical report that has been prepared for the purpose of traffic conditions related to the purpose of interchange for South Route 99 to Dinuba Avenue. The report was prepared in conjunction with COG. We did hire a consultant and the city. The consultant was VRPA Technologies. And again, it's really done to take a study overall. We've done studies like this in the past, but it's just studying that overall proposed intersection or overpass. The intersections that were done, because this report is actually done with a traffic analysis as well component. So they're studying intersections to see what that traffic flow and circulation will look like. So for this report, we looked at Dinuba Avenue, Floral Avenue 99, off-ramp, and also the northbound off-ramp, Floral Avenue and Highland, Floral Avenue and northbound off-ramp, Highland and northbound loop ramp, and Highland southbound off-ramp as well. So kind of diving into the information a little bit, what you find in the report is actually a proposed, again, this is just conceptual for the sake of the report. There's not a full in-depth, this is really high level of what a proposal of this intersection may look like. So you can see the alignment and how it intersects with the Golden State road itself and the old 99, and how you can give a traffic flow from the 99 itself to the east and west side of the city. To the west side of the city, it actually does transpose into the Dinuba. It's part of the section of the road that is on that side of town. So to getting into the kind of the meat of the overall report, what you need to do is dive into the report and the analysis that is prepared for the intersections themselves. So we talked about the intersections they talked about, but let's kind of dive into what that meant and how the study came forward. So within this table, what they're actually doing is identifying level of service. So what level of service are, you can see the alphabets on the table, with A being your top, being a good grade, and F being a failing. The best way I can explain it is just like a passing grade within school. That's a great explanation that Dan gave me on how to explain it, so I appreciate that. So again, A is passing, and we'll look through this table on how it actually proposes what we're studying and what that looks like. So looking at these intersections, we'll just take them one by one. The first one being Dinuba Avenue and Highland Avenue, okay? So for the target point in which they did and the existing conditions, you can see in the AM, and it is a B, which is a fair assessment of it. And with the PM, you see a C. So the next table to see after that and be consistent for the rest of them, you will see existing conditions with overcrossing, the next one being existing conditions with the underpass. And then you have horizon. The horizon means for 2040 and what they expected that traffic flow to look like. So we'll skip into those sections now. So existing conditions with the overcross, you see a B and C, and then you move into an interchange, you see a B and C as well. Now for the horizon years, which is more important, is really important because you're assessing future and how long these improvements will actually take you out, that you're still within a passing level of traffic flow or levels of service. So for the horizon year, again, 2040, you see that intersection itself will have a D for the AM and A plus for the PM. For the horizon year of an overcrossing, you see a D and an F. And then for the horizon year of interchange, again, you see a E and an F. So using this analysis, those intersections will still be failing on those future dates, regardless of that Dinuba overcrossing is there. So moving on to the next one. You'll see Floral Avenue and State Route 99 off-ramp. So again, starting with the current conditions, which is a B and B, okay? Moving on to existing conditions for the overcrossing, again, a B and B, as well as with the intersection or interchange. Now moving on to the horizon year. You will see at the current, you'll be a B and an F. And again, with the overcrossing, a B and an F. And then with the intersection, you'll see a B and E. So what does that mean? It means you're pretty much consistent with the overpass itself going into the future years as well. Moving on to the next one, Floral Avenue and Highland. Again, starting with a C and C with the current conditions, moving on to the overcrossing and to the interchange, you'll see the same thing, a C and a C. moving on to the rising year, you'll see that it is starting to fail. So you'll see a D and an F. And so for with the overcrossing or in the interchange, you actually see a C and an F as well. Okay. So Floral Avenue and 99 off ramp. To start with a B and B. And with the existing or with an overcrossing and interchange at that time, you'll see a B and a B and again. Now moving into the future years, with the current conditions, you'll see a C and an E. And for the overcross, you see a C and an E. And the intersections you'll see, or interchange, you'll see a C and a D. So for the final one on the table, you'll see South Route off ramp in Highland Avenue. Again, starting with an A and A, so pretty good overall. And you'll see that with the overcrossing and with the interchange. So with the rising year, you'll be at a B and a C. With the overall crossing, you'll see a B and a C, and a B and a C again with the interchange. So the overall table, you can see the rising years, you got a pretty mixed use here. You see that are currently failing with the interchange and actually without the interchange as well. So you see some impacts, but you do see some failing analysis with this table. So part of this overall study that you see, there were some intersections that were studied, and to get to a point where they would be actually improving and getting to a more passing level, there was multiple intersections that need to be improved. I didn't bring this table up, but we will dive into it a little bit more because it flows into Floral Avenue. So the intersections that need to be improved were the Dinuba Avenue and Highland, Floral Avenue and 99 off ramp, Floral Avenue and Highland, and Floral Avenue and 99 off ramps. So again, we'll get into those grades a little bit more in depth on what that analysis meant when we dive into Floral Avenue. So before we move on to, well, let me get into the next section. So the conclusion of this report. Generally accepted traffic engineering principles and methods are employed to estimate the amounts of traffic expected to be generated by the project and to be analyzed for the traffic conditions expected to the exit of the future, as noted in the analysis above, incorporated to the grade S separation or the interchange, and Dinuba Avenue will decrease traffic among the larger arterials and streets and the roadways in the study. In some cases, construction of the grade separation or interchange eliminate the LOS, so levels of service, efficiencies in the study area in the horizon year scenario. However, improvements in the study areas, major conditions, Floral and Avenue and Highland, will still be necessary to be accommodating the plans of growth to the city sphere of influence. Basically, kind of summarize, yes, it will impact the overall long-term traffic circulation for failing, but there will be still some failing intersections where there's still be some traffic flow where we have issues. So that's kind of the summary of that feasibility study, again, that was done in 2017.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions from council for Isaac? The table he just showed us? I would have a question on the Floral and the 99 off ramp. How in the world, even though that's 4 years old, how did that get a B? I mean,
well,
that would be more like a D or an F at rush hour.
Yeah, it was done in 2017. So, and they did hire consultants to do these studies to do traffic analysis. So,
okay.
Isaac, I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. These projections are from 2017?
The initial study was done in 2017. The horizon year is 2040.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to Floral Avenue. So as Dan discussed, just a refresher, Floral Avenue within the general plan is actually identified as an arterial street. And again, I apologize for the tightness of these maps. That's why we did issue a printed copy. So I hope that helps. To assess Floral Avenue, it's never had a feasibility study for Floral in 99 that we're aware of, or formal study. So what we're utilizing is Caltrans letter that was actually executed in September 20 for the feasibility study for Dinuba back in 17. For that letter, we actually attach this to the back of your packets. So I will be reading verbatim from that letter so that you can summarize it in a whole. But to be able to see the full letter, it is part of your packet. So from that letter, we'll move on. There's multiple comments, and we'll just kind of pick some of the ones that identify and talk about Floral Avenue and what they mean. So again, this was issued back in 2017. So based on the projection future volumes, the traffic study made some recommendations to add additional lanes and various ramp segments at critical intersections. However, the improvements did not take into consideration the right-of-way constraints. The existing construction columns for Floral Avenue and Highland will not allow additional lanes to be added to those segments of Floral and Highland that are currently underneath the crossing of freeway lanes without major reconstruction. So what does that mean? So this is Floral Avenue and 99 Underpass. As you can see, the pillars are on each side. It does make it difficult to attempt to expand that a road underneath without some major kind of construction. What that looks like for the future or what that may entail and how that actually gets done is kind of difficult to be identified without having a more formal study on what that looks like. We just know right now with what we currently have, we do know it'll take a major project overall to be able to widen that underpass. So this is Highway or Highland in 99, similar thing. You can see the pillars. This one actually has some in the middle. So they're kind of, you can see that it is tight within those intersections. You do have 2 lanes going in both ways, but attempting to expand that would be very difficult due to the construct or the format in which it was constructed. That takes us to Caltrans Comment number 3. So in order to accommodate projected future traffic demand for South Route 99, southbound exit ramp to Floral Avenue, the traffic recommendation is adding the additional right-of-way lane to an exit ramp and then the additional or adding an additional eastbound lane through Floral Avenue. However, there is a commercial development that is constricting in close proximity to the existing exit ramp. Due to the close proximity of the development to the existing exit ramp, acquiring additional right-of-way lane would be difficult. So what does that entail? So this is what it's looking like. So if you're getting off the freeway off ramp going southbound, you do have multiple lanes, but what they're requesting is an additional lane of right-of-way next to the development, which nowadays is actually the Boss Center. So they're actually requesting additional right-of-way and additional lane coming off that ramp. In addition to that, they're actually wanting an eastbound lane that added to the freeway to Floral Avenue. But again, because of the freeway underpass and the structure of it, it's not feasible at this time. It would take major construction.
Plus, it would go back into 2 lanes. It's ridiculous. It would go from 3 lanes to 2 lanes on the underpass and then go back to 3, right?
Yeah,
so that would create a bottleneck.
It kind of bottleneck you up into that intersection too as well, because you'd have to expand going easterly as well, or else you'd end up in the same situation. So that moves us on to comment number 4. And again, I didn't go through the full comments. What I'm looking at is really the ones that identify Floral, because the study did identify Floral as a major arterial, but that needs to be assessed. So that's why I really wanted to identify what that said and how it can be improved, but what the Caltrans letter is recommending or stating. In order to accommodate future traffic demand at the intersection of Floral and Highland, the traffic study recommended adding additional left turn lane and right turn lane. It also recommends adding an additional through lane and right turn lane on the eastbound approach. However, due to the structure of the columns in the freeway main line, additional lanes are not viable improvements that will be addressed to project the future deficiencies of the intersection. So again, let's see what that looks like. So they did want turning lanes on each side of the roads, but we're going to focus on the westbound. So as you see now, they wanted an additional turn lane, which is where the rallies is currently. So again, land acquisition, you can tell that that's a small site as it is now, so that'd be difficult as well. And they also want additional through lane. So you can see again how Floral Avenue's construction and how difficult that would be. conclusion. The conclusion of the letter is stipulated as so. The construction of a new overcrossing or interchange at the Dinuba Avenue will attract some traffic demand away from the South Route interchange at Manning Avenue and Floral Avenue based on its location. However, the attraction will not be significant enough to elevate the future impacts, again, raising it from a D to a B or whatever that may be, to the two existing South Route or State Route 99 interchanges on Manning Avenue and Floral. And it is recommended that the city explore possibilities of reconfiguration of the existing interchanges at the South Route or State Route 99, southbound exit ramp at Floral Avenue and Highland Avenue, and South or State Route 99 southbound exit ramp to Highland Avenue to a 2-lane roundabout based on physical constraints of Floral Avenue and Highland Avenue. So again, just kind of summarize what it's stipulating. It's saying that the interchange itself, as far as Dinuba, will help, but given the interchanges at different locations, especially at Floral and Highland, you still will have some traffic issues overall. So they'd like us to explore different options to assess that as well. So that kind of concludes the report overall for that section, but we move on to another section that we would like to assess for that area too as well. So that's Stillman Avenue. So this slide was brought about to as a topic of conversation per Mr. Nelson, that the expansion of Stillman Avenue could relieve some traffic of the Floral Avenue. You can see the expansion of what that would look like in the red line on the map. Now, for the purpose of conversation, we brought this up so that you can have a visual of what that may entail. Again, this street is a local street. So usually this street is actually developed, our local street is developed with development. So for example, if somebody came into one of those parcels to the north or south of it, someone would actually be requested to be expanded out to accommodate that development. But it's a topic of conversation to be able to see how traffic can flow. So that concludes my presentation or my section of the presentation. Is there any questions before we move on?
Just one on the Stillman that we were talking about. That right now, would that even qualify as what kind of street would that be? A local street?
It's still
right
local,
now?
correct.
Okay.
Even if it did get expanded, it would still not grow to an arterial, things of that nature, the way the general plan is identified, it'd still be a local.
But just to conceptualize it, it's an east-west. It's as you get off 99 south, you can go straight onto 43. It's a road that could potentially be a collector in the future if it were expanded, and it could take traffic. Instead of getting off on Floral, you could go all the way south on 43 off of 99, and then you could go west on Stillman to get to DeWolf if you were headed over, say, to the new park development, the commercial development, and to go around there. In other words, it would be a way of avoiding all of that commercial buildup on Floral that we have right now and we've had for years as a problem.
So given the general plan and how it identifies, it does look into development in the future. That's why we have the zoning. So that it still identifies it as a local street with those future intentions in mind. So that's how it's identified.
Okay.
And one of the things you'll notice at the intersection that has been developed out by Kaiser and Les Schwab, there's a number of turn lanes that is larger than what you would expect from a local street. So
It was originally conceptualized as that is what Mr. Nelson and his representatives are here today, and we'll hear from them in a little bit. But I know Councilmember Guerra and I went out there and looked at that, and they're like 4 lanes, you know, on that road. It looks like it was originally conceptualized when it was built to accommodate that future growth and to take traffic off of 99 and off of Floral. With
And so looking
Stillman,
at
Stillman was never realized. It sounds like it's just still in reserve there, but it's kind of a road that doesn't go anywhere right now. It just stops next to Kaiser.
I think it's typically waiting for development to prompt the infrastructure.
And you can definitely see the difference between a road that has been done some way back time in the past and some that are being done now to accommodate future growth. per the general plan. So those intersections and things of that nature are accommodating to what we see in the future. So for example, some of the older neighborhoods are just single lane streets where in today's nature, maybe it's multiple lanes to accommodate that future growth. So that's why we have the general plan and how we vision that out.
And we're meeting today in order to really flesh the general plan out, right? So we see what the general plan is saying for potential amendments to that general plan as Selma grows. And also to accommodate that future growth of Selma.
That is the topic of discussion we can go through, yes, as a general plan. Looking at the general plan, really our workshop is to identify what does that area look like? What do we see it doing in the future? And to make sure that we are doing it appropriately.
And I think identifying how things have changed since that first general plan was formulated as opposed to, 2021 and what Selma sees for the future growth as well in terms of development.
Are there any other questions before we move on? Okay. I will go ahead and turn it on to our partners at Caltrans.
Thank you, Isaac. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Michael Navarro, Deputy District Director of Planning here at Caltrans. Just to give a little historical context, just so you know, I've probably been working with your current and your past agency representatives at the City of Selma for probably my whole 20-year career. So I am pretty familiar with the issues in Selma, the Floral Avenue interchange, reviewed a lot of projects, past and present. And my senior planner is on a call, Dave Padilla. He primarily works on these now until we're very familiar with the issues. And thank you for having us here today. Going back to some of the issues, going back as far as, when Selma had the new Walmart proposed. I mean, that's probably when Floral really daylighted about the capacity constraints underneath the undercrossing that Isaac showed. We reviewed the Rockwell Pond. And historically, the challenge we've had in Selma has really been, as we saw the land use map earlier, is essentially what you have is a lot of the residential population on the east side of 99, and you have the commercial draws like the new shopping centers and the Walmart on the west side, but you have limited opportunities as city engineer Dan referred to as far as crossing the 99. So a bit of quite a predicament, and I experienced this. I'll say this last week firsthand. I was on my way to Visalia, and I stopped off at the Carl's Jr. over there off of Floral Highland area to grab some lunch on the way, and I sat underneath the undercrossing for several cycles of that signal, recognizing the congestion at the Highland Floral intersection. So extremely familiar with the constraints, experienced it firsthand. So I just want to share that with you before I start. So a couple things I wanted to talk about was different opportunities. So Isaac asked me to talk kind of about next steps, and we've kind of, contemplated what to do here for years and years, but we just haven't been able to get the ball rolling a little bit. So before I get in the project delivery process, I kind of want to talk about something we've done at other locations and we've done in Selma, for example, the 99 Mountain View interchange, is we've done some planning level feasibility studies that really kind of hopefully paint a picture and get support and get an idea of the direction, the city council leadership would like to go. When we do these feasibility studies, like I said, they're really just that, just planning level studies, not a whole lot of in-depth engineering, but try and develop some real concepts. And we usually try and prioritize near term and long term. So just to give you a couple examples, the Mountain View one, we did look at things we could do in the near term that were cost effective as far as putting in roundabouts and getting that operational life out to 10 to 20 years. And we also looked at, the ultimate footprint, which was what we call an L9 interchange with your large partial cloverleaf. And that kind of gives the decision makers an idea of what costs look like, what's reasonably affordable, what kind of benefit cost you receive out of such improvements, so you can make educated, informed decisions as you move forward. So we've looked at these for another example of interchange we're doing right now for City of Fresno is 99 Shaw, which is another very challenging interchange. Those studies can get a little expensive. One thing we kind of throw out the city is something we might want to look at for near term is those intersections that Isaac alluded to. One of the concepts we thought about is, I'm not sure where the city stands on this. Some jurisdictions really like roundabouts, some do not, and I understand. But we talked about because of queuing from the signals, is there an opportunity for a series of roundabouts, along the Floral corridor? At the ramp intersection, for example, we have the driveway across from the off-ramp, which is actually a non-standard feature nowadays in the design manual. But it would allow for full movements with the roundabout there. Highland and Floral is another location we talked about potentially, could a roundabout help in And, it'll slow the speeds down a little bit, but ideally you might have free flow where you're not sitting in a queue that queues back past the ramp intersection. And even extending east towards Floral at the, I think you have a stop control there. But I remember we talked about these with previous people on Selma staff, like Brian Hemby used to work there. Him and I used to talk about these concepts of a series of, kind of closely spaced roundabouts as an opportunity, but we've never really done a full feasibility or planning level study at Floral. We've kind of conceptualized based on volumes on what capacity needs there are, and without really accounting for the right-of-way needs. But we think there might be some potential to look at something along those and do kind of a little more of a focused study that wouldn't be as expensive as one of these full-blown feasibility studies. The one we did for Mountain View, and we partnered with Tulare County, Fresno Cog, and Kingsburg. I think that was about a $90,000 study, but it did look at 2 interchange locations. We're thinking something for Floral a little more focused, will be much more affordable, and might give some direction as where you want to go for the near term. As far as if we were really looking at some of these high dollar improvements, like talking about a future measure project where we're looking at reconstruction of a location, whether it's a Floral interchange or Dinuba. And I apologize if you heard some of this before when we did the Mountain View presentations. It's redundant, but the process is very similar for both. Essentially what we do is we start off with what we call a project initiation document. For interchanges, I think we've thrown out numbers around the $200,000 mark. These are really scoping, they identify scope, cost, and schedule. Not a lot of engineering here done, some preliminary environmental scoping, but essentially that would identify, kind of a footprint for what the ultimate fix was, and that becomes what we call your programming document. The next step is we go into what we call PA&ED, which is project approval and environmental document. That is what it is. It's your environmental clearance process. One thing I want to note on this is, you really don't want to start your project initiation document or your PA&ED process until you have a reasonable idea of funding, meaning you want to have reasonable funding like in the local measure or a constrained project with RTP, because if you don't have reasonable funding, we can't finalize the environmental document and sign off on it. Our directors can't sign it until we know that there's a potential for funding. It has to be somewhat constrained, meaning, like I said, in the measure. Then after that, then we go into our plan specifications, estimates, and right-of-ways. That's your true engineering. That's your design phase, where we're getting it ready for construction because we know we have construction dollars lined up. So like I said, the process is very similar, but what we want to do is the timing is the crucial part of this element. As you know, I think Tony will probably talk more about this. I'll talk a little bit about funding, but I know that's going to be more Tony's area. But, Measure C is coming up for reauthorization. So hypothetically, let's say one of these projects made into the measure per se, and we had kind of an idea of what funding year that money was available, then we'd probably want to back into a process of as far as when it made sense to start the project initiation document, environmental, et cetera, for funding. And just to be clear, I know this sounds kind of weird for some of you that are new to transportation. Caltrans does not fund interchanges. We do the mainline improvements, but interchanges are typically locally sponsored. So all the interchange work you see taking place for new interchanges up and down the 99 corridor, Veterans Interchange, the one south in Tulare County, those are all being locally funded through either measure, their local share dollars, or sometimes grant money. If you're in a position where you move far enough on the process and you got a project that could be obligated within a certain year to meet the criteria of the federal grant program, you'll see people applying for projects like infra and build to fund these interchanges. I think a decision the council will have to make at some point is you saw the presentation about, Dinuba versus Floral. And one thing I just want to clarify on the level of service numbers, if you're not familiar with those, unlike in school, a C or D isn't really a bad grade when it comes to transportation. A is kind of unrealistic. That's kind of like what you see when you drive the freeway at nighttime with nobody on the roadway. Typically, when we design for our horizon years, we're looking at somewhere around the CD threshold. So CD is not a horrible grade, but obviously you get into E's and F's and you're at capacity and gridlock. And that's kind of why you saw the numbers for delay. So you saw different locations. You saw LOSFs in multiple locations, but there are varying degrees of Fs. You saw some with 2-minute delay, 3-minute delay. So we stop at F, but like I said, the delay gets even higher. Another thing, going forward as far as positioning for funding, one thing I think about is that, the state's going in kind of a different direction. We're not really supportive of as much we used to be of capacity enhancing projects. We're looking for alternative ways to move people. So, the ideal way is you could always make the road wider and wider and wider, but the ideal way would be to reduce demand for crossing the freeway, right, through your land use choices, and balance the commercial on the east and the west side and the residential and vice versa. The aerial map we showed earlier, there's not a lot of circulation on the west side right now as far as a grid. And I see you guys talking about Stillman and other parallel routes and, making a grid which could help in the future. But as it stands now, like I said, you pretty much have the very limited crossing points. For Dinuba, we've talked about, should Dinuba be an interchange or should be an overcrossing? We have locations we've done in the state where we've actually built projects where we build them as an overcrossing as the first phase, clear it, and then with the idea that potentially there could be, the demand for ramps in the future. And that's one way to kind of save money in terms of phasing the project, because the overcrossing would probably be, I'll say, less opposition from the standpoint that essentially that's kind of done as a locally sponsored project as well, because you're not tying into the main line. You're building essentially a local road that's going to go over the freeway. Obviously, there's permitting authority from the state, but if it's decided that's what's needed to accommodate some of your growth, then it's definitely a discussion we could have. But I think, for this group, I think it'd be, based on the data you have right now, what we're showing is that the Floral interchange is going to need improvements whether you do anything at Dinuba or not. And whether that comes in the form of planning for long-term or doing some kind of near-term improvements operationally, that's something we can discuss. If you're doing the near-term improvements like roundabouts, that kind of opens up different funding scenarios as well, because there's opportunities like CMAQ money, which is, congestion mitigation air quality money, which is eligible for roundabouts. Typically, our operations deputy, I know we don't pay for, we don't pay for interchanges, but when there's operational improvements of roundabouts, typically we're able to make some kind of a contribution to a roundabout where it makes sense. So I think now, like I said, I think we're at that point now where I think that the leadership will be tasked with kind of deciding what the priorities are for the city, what's going to give you the best value for your money, and then also recognizing that the opportunity is now for the measure. The measure committee had their first kickoff meeting this past week, but I don't know that Selma was in attendance, and I would just encourage you to be very involved in that process throughout to get in a position, because the last go around for the last measure. I don't think Selma was represented as far as like the Floral interchange. That was a discussion we've had in the past. So just wanted to share that. And I think that concludes what I plan to discuss, but I'll be around for the rest of the meeting. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for that. And you and Tony and I were at that same Council of Governments meeting last night when we went over the regional transportation plan. And I did ask, I think, Christine, if the Selma was still the Dinuba Road interchange, the L9 was still a proposed project. And it sounds like it still is for 2022. So we are keeping our oar in the water there, knowing that that's going to be important for the next phase of Measure C funding, whenever that happens, whether it, voted on earlier in 2024 or whether it's at 2026. But that interchange seems like it's something that's a really large project. That's something that is 80 or 90 million at this point. And it's something that would need to be funded through the measure or some funding source like that. I think we're discussing that. I appreciate you mentioning that about the measure committee. I'd like to know more. Maybe if you could shoot me an email, Mike, or the city manager, about when those meetings are for the measure. Or I can find out, maybe Tony, you could send me an email, or the city manager, about when those meetings are. I completely agree. We need to be involved with that as a city, on what they're thinking and when that measure is going to be voted on.
Yeah, the staff are assigned to the committee, so.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's good news. And in terms of the project initiation document, thank you for walking us through that. Again, the kind of the trajectory of what has to happen, the process of making improvements to existing roadways or adding major infrastructure like we're talking. I think it gives council a really good concept of what has to happen, which sometimes comes down to having the dollars. Comes down to funding, like you say. You don't want to get too far into something without having that funding to complete the project. I think that's really important. I think that's one of the reasons we're here today, to look into see what we should fund, because economics is the science of rational choice, and that means making decisions. And I think that's what we're faced with as a city, I think we can't do everything all at once. We have to decide on a direction and kind of go in that direction and look for funding on that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor. And I think by, seeing Tony and I being here, I think you hope we get the impression that we're here to help. And I think we're good partners with Fresno COG, and Fresno COG is typically, the one that does the planning process for a lot of these projects. So I think we've gotten pretty good at coming together with our local agencies, sitting down and kind of carving a path and as a process and lay it out for you to see what makes sense as far as timing, et cetera. So I'm sure I speak for Tony and myself. We're happy to have those conversations at any time.
Thank you for that.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next slide. First, thank you, Michael, for that clarification as well for the level of service and that definition. We'll now move on to Tony Bourne, our Executive Director of Fresno Council of Governments.
Thank you, Isaac. Appreciate the invite today to the workshop. There's a lot to think about when it comes to your circulation needs. Mike mentioned Shaw Avenue, and I was thinking, your situation with Floral is very similar to Shaw. The difference is you guys have a undercrossing and they've got an overcrossing, and the uses are reversed. In Fresno, up at Shaw, all of the commercial uses are on the east, right? But there's all of this residential growth on the west. So they have the same kind of corridor issues, right? A bottleneck when you get, right? But what we were able to do up there is we got Shaw Avenue in the measure. And so now that's how you can kind of avoid what, let's just call it Floral for your sake, and move, to the north to get across 99. I think the problem is as Mike said, and the Caltrans slides demonstrated, is that it may turn out that the Dinuba alternative doesn't solve the problems that you guys, are looking to solve. And that being said, that would be for you guys to decide. But I will tell you this: in the next measure, what we're going to need is a project, right? And then that project, to the degree that you can frame it as a quote regional project, right? The better off you will be, because you're going to be competing in the regional pond for regional dollars of a significant amount, right? But if your project is perceived as this is really a local issue, this isn't a regional issue, you'll have a hard time getting traction, getting that project getting funded. So I just share that with you because that's the reality of it. Mike pretty much said it all. One of the advantages, if we could, I'm just going to be very optimistic and just pretend that you guys identify the project you wanted. You got it submitted in the plan. The plan, the committee approved it. You guys have the project in the plan. We get the measure approved early. Now, all those steps that Mike was saying that they can't take right now because there's no funding to do it, now there is a funding stream identified. So everyone can begin to work on that and begin to move the project forward, if that makes sense. But that's why that's one of the reasons why we're pushing for the early reauthorization. We've got a lot of projects that if we could get them started earlier, it would benefit us in so many different ways. The earlier we deliver these projects, the cheaper they are. And so, that's just the way it is in this business. So I'm here to do all that I can to help you and try to kind of coach you up as best I can so that you guys can position yourself well for the competition. But I think right now we got to make sure that you guys have a project, right? That you guys, this is our project, and it's regional in context, and that's why the measure needs to fund it. That's why I thought that the Dinuba project had some promise, because I thought you could make an argument that would improve circulation for all the communities west of 99, right? Excuse me, east of 99. Now they would be able to get over to the west of 99 that much sooner. So we would frame it as, a regional project rather than a Selma project. But with the Caltrans findings, that's going to be a little bit more challenging, shall we say.
Tony, and those findings are from 2017. To what degree are those time-based? How often do those need to be redone and refreshed in order to make them relevant for funding opportunities?
Oh, you're referring to what project, Mayor?
This study was 2017. It was done on Dinuba, showing that the Dinuba Road overpass may not really relieve congestion on the horizon at 2040. How often do those studies need to be refreshed? Like this study's 4 years old.
I would look to Caltrans, because what will happen is we'll be in these meetings, right, talking about the projects. And the question will be, Caltrans, are these legitimate numbers, cost estimates, et cetera, et cetera. And then if Caltrans says, well, we need to update those, then we should probably undertake that in advance. If in fact, the Dinuba is going to be your candidate project.
And what
So,
is
so I think what I
qualifying?
was, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of regionality, what qualifies as a regional project these days, as opposed to, say, 4 or 5 years ago when it was traditional widening and taking traffic off of 99?
Well, to be honest, I think it's going to come down to the eye of the beholder, right? And being the steering committee. So that's why it's important, because a lot of the major regional obvious projects have been addressed over the past 30 years from the existing measures. Now we're into this third measure. And so the regional projects will look different. They're going to look different. They're not going to be these grandiose, here we're taking it from some arterial from 2 to 4 lanes, right? Because it just needs it. It's going to be dependent on how, I think, on how each of the member agencies who submit the projects, how they frame their project to create a regional kind of vibe to it, if you will, right? Now I see Stillman there. I think, okay, that may be the solution to your problem, and I'm thinking, will that fly in a Measure C process as a quote regional project? Maybe, maybe not, but that's kind of needs to be part of your forethought as you're trying to figure out exactly how you want to handle it.
Tony, would it help or does it assist in helping the regionality to have a park as a park as a destination there? This would be one of the few large parks in the area that would be a destination for a lot of different cities in that area. Certainly, yes. That's the kind of thing, Mayor, that that if you include that, and provide your rationale for why, hey, wait a minute, this is in fact a regional project. We have this large regional park here that's going to attract people from all over the county, many of them from east of 99. And so there you go. We need to, solve the mobility issue. And I think one of the draws for Dinuba was all the housing that's coming in. Amberwood, for instance, is, 1,250 units that will be along that Dinuba corridor that will create some serious traffic impacts as well. I think that was the original thinking for the Dinuba Road overpass, which also perhaps lent itself to being defined as a regional project. Yeah, I think that's going to be the key is how you can frame your project as, hey, this is the best regional project you're going to find out here in the eastern portion of Fresno County. Better than anything Sanger's going to come up with or any of the other guys for all of these various reasons. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Is there any more questions before we conclude or move forward?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
If I may. First one is, and Tony, I have a question for you, but the first one is this leadership task team. And Teresa, you said what city staff are members representing that or going to that meeting?
Yeah, our consultants at Gateway are assigned to attend and the first meeting, pardon me, and Isaac is an alternate.
And how many times have they met?
They had their first meeting this week.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Okay, good. Okay, and that's good. The next one is, this question is for Tony. Warren, the new Measure C, does it have any funding or is it tasked or will it be tasked or does it have any funding or is it able to take any new overpass development?
That's all to be determined. We're we're going to be in the process of crafting the expenditure plan, right? Think of it as a funding pie, right? And the committee is going to decide, okay, how much of this funding pie needs to go to our locals for all of their local street and maintenance needs, right? Now that's polling very high. I think all of you have issues with, we have aging local street networks throughout all of our cities. So that's going to be I'm pretty confident it's probably going to be larger than the 34% that we're giving it right now, right? Okay, but that's this whole thing is just kind of a work in progress, and we are just now kicking off. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was disappointed on Wednesday because of our 16-member agencies, we only had 4 of our cities in attendance, right?
Very
And
sad.
I had sent an email out earlier in the week explaining to them how important it was to be participating, because this Measure C3 is going to be the foundation for transportation, for the next 20, maybe 30 years. So you guys, the locals, need to get in there and lobby for their local needs, right? Because others will be in there lobbying for their needs, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So taking into regards what Michael Navarro stated, our leadership will be tasked to be put in a position to make sure that we can go after the funding. Would it be, is it best that we as a city of Selma task our leadership, our group here, to actually look at a project like maybe the Dinuba overpass or the Stillman, and start with the numbers, or generating the numbers in regards to, would that help? The numbers and the need of the.
Right. Yeah. And I think you guys internally there at Selma, you guys have to decide, okay, this is our baby, this is our project, and this is for all these different reasons, and we're going after it. And we're going to produce all of the statistical information, the data that support why this is a great project.
We got to, as a whole, we got to come up with one that we feel, and we got to task it out. And okay. All right. Well, thank you. Those are questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, is there any more questions?
Isaac, can I add something? Michael.
Of course, go ahead.
Okay. I just want. I feel like there was a question for me that I didn't get to respond to from that Tony asked, or was asked of Tony, for as far as the data for the 2017 report the mayor brought up. So one thing I want to clarify is this report was really done as through Fresno Cog, courtesy of Fresno Cog, for their they hired a consultant. They have a circuit engineer. Excuse me, Tony, if I botched the name of the program, where they help communities or smaller cities with engineering services. And so this is really meant to be more of an informational document. So it doesn't really drive the project delivery process I alluded to. It's really meant to help you folks make a decision based on data. As far as the age of the document, I think, 4 years in the world of ours, typically when we look at traffic studies for new development, we'll say a couple years old. But as far as this being 4 years old, unless a lot has changed in the city, as far as maybe, the assumptions that the consultant might have made in 2017 based on approved projects and what direction the city was growing, unless a lot of that material has changed, that would maybe change on the inputs, resulting in different conclusions, then I don't know if it'd have much, of affect the report that much. But to Tony's point, like I said, when we start going through the project delivery process, we would want to, make sure we're sitting down and telling you the timing of when to prepare certain documents, whether it's environmental or traffic studies, because as Tony mentioned, if you did a traffic study now or started the PID document now, and we said, hey, well, you don't have funding for, 10 more years, then when it came time, we'd say, well, now you have to redo this document because you kind of shot the gun and started a little early on it. The feasibility study process is just kind of, like I said, a tool before the normal project delivery process if we need to collect more data or gather more information. If we're thinking that the long-term improvement is going to be something that has to be in the measure, I probably wouldn't recommend starting the PID and PA&ED until we know that information of what's going to be in the measure and we have a better idea of funding. So like as Tony said, we're talking about continuing the current measure, not necessarily saying this one doesn't start till 2027, but which provides opportunity to back into a schedule. But when I mentioned about the roundabouts and those kind of things, we could definitely have a conversation with the city about doing kind of a much smaller scope feasibility study and look at, operational improvements for, maybe the next, 10 years or so or whatever, until we have that, large infrastructure project supported by the measure. That's the direction we end up going.
Well, in terms of critical timelines, I mean, we have a park coming in. We have a deadline of 2024 on that park. So we're going to see some traffic inflow on Floral pretty soon here. And, the new Measure C doesn't come in until 2026, I believe. So that's going to be a while. Floral may be a little more pressing in terms of timeline than the Dinuba solution, and Stillman might be another solution in the meantime that could be a little shorter term given the dollars that are involved. For the feasibility studies, how would Caltrans actually work with the city of Selma with engineering and with city staff to do that? And Tony, is there
Correct.
money? I'm sorry, is there money in COG for feasibility studies and Council of Governments that might be brought to bear to help a little bit some of the smaller cities to do feasibility studies?
Well, our funding can only be used for planning, right? So that was kind of, that initial money we put up there was, we recognized that, okay, Selma needs to take a look at the potential of Dinuba Avenue, right? And maybe the money isn't, you guys don't have the money handy, but that's our job. We can make that money. That's what we did. We basically said, we'll provide some money, and Caltrans provide a little money. And I think you guys may even thrown some in, I forget. And away we go. But that's limited to planning. And Mike, when he talks about PIDs and these kinds of things, we're moving kind of beyond the planning, and we start to morph into the engineering world. And that's where my limitations are met.
And I think Mike was saying that if the city would explore the roundabout concept, that there might be some assistance by Caltrans on that, because that is something that Caltrans looks favorably on, and it's worked in the past. Is that something that could potentially be matched by COG as almost like a matching grant or something, Tony, or would that exceed the scope of planning?
Well, I will say this: we have our circuit engineer, right? And he's charged with basically assisting our city, our member agencies, our small cities with, do you have some engineering needs that, aren't too grandiose that we could sort of help you with? And so that might be an opportunity for our circuit engineer to partner with Caltrans and your staff to kind of put something together. But we're going to do all we can to help you guys, because we need to. That's our role and that's our responsibility.
So the circuit engineer could help with the feasibility study potentially.
Yeah, on some level, yes, he could help maybe craft the outline. I don't know exactly. We'd have to talk exactly what we're talking about. But I think from Mike and I's perspective, the initial sort of feasibility study has provided this kind of higher level altitude planning assessment of the situation. And as we move forward, we got to get closer to the ground, which means, okay, now we're going to be looking at some engineering studies and that kind of thing. And then that's when that kind of work is beyond the COGS planning limitations. But I do have the circuit engineer there who can help on some level.
Yeah, so the program that was actually used for that study back in 2017 was a circuit planner.
Was it the
program.
circuit planner? Okay.
Yeah, which we still utilize today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. It's good to hear.
So for Caltrans, what we could do is, initially, I think Eric Goals from my team, Isaac, I think he threw a number initially to around 25,000 or something to do like a study for that corridor. I could be wrong. I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but typically what we would do is, we probably usually when we give a number like that, when Caltrans doesn't work, we're actually, I have my staff, we eat a lot of the cost in-house for in-kind services that we're doing that we're not passing on to the city. There might be some kind of hybrid model that we can come up with if there's assistance from the circuit engineer, like Tony said, that could dabble in some of the work, and maybe remember the modeling, forecasting, and concept design. I could have my operation folks as well as Eric to help make that a little more doable, to where it's not just a flat out, co-op for $25,000, and maybe we could come up with a hybrid model if that's something we're interested in pursuing. I think really, as far as the low hanging fruit of what we could do now in advance of the measures, that's probably kind of what we're looking at, I think. Because like I said, I wouldn't advise the city moving forward like a PID and going down that path, because I wouldn't want that document to be stale by the time we line up, determine what the measure is and what projects play out, et cetera. But yeah, no, I agree with Tony. From the measure standpoint, looking at projects of regional significance, we can look at a couple ways. If we're talking about Floral, Floral may not resonate on a regional need, might be viewed local, but there's a way we can kind of tie in 43 a little bit that has some interregional nature to it. Dinuba, initially, when it was scoped a long time ago, we talked about doing the overcrossing, but we're actually talking about realigning 43 as part of that, which becomes, kind of a monster project. Really gets, could be cost prohibitive at that point. We're talking in the, over the 100 million mark for sure, because you're doing a lot of road work attached to it. But I would also add, when you look into overcrossing, if you look at your grid, as I look at a Google map now, there's not a lot of circulation, on the west side. So for it to be effective, I mean, you have to really look at your overall circulation. So I'm glad you're talking about things like Stillman, because really, Dinuba kind of functions as I think a collector of the east, and has a kind of a gap between Gold State and the 99. So you have to start looking at your own circulation patterns to see does it support an overcrossing as well. So those are all things we need to really look at.
This is Teresa. Question: if we're looking for a project with the next Measure C, when would we start the PID? Or when would you recommend so it wouldn't be stale?
Right. So I wouldn't consider starting a PID until your project's approved in the measure, because you won't be able to do environmental work unless it's in the measure. And then I think at that point, we're probably having a conversation with Tony, Mike, and Les over there at COG about, when is construction money available? Because I mean, Tony, you know more about this to speak this than I do, but I mean, you have the measure approved and it has a life of the measure, but then theoretically, you guys kind of strategically identify, at what point in the measure construction dollars are ready for different phases, right?
Right. Yes. Now, the truth of the matter is, if we do get the measure passed, then the Transportation Authority will have the ability to bond against those future revenues, right? So that's big money that's out there that can be, sort of moved forward, advance all these projects that we've been talking about. I think from where I sit, your candidate project, we need to get that tuned up enough so that it will, have solid standing as a candidate. And to go back to Mayor Robertson's earlier question about, what constitutes regional project, I don't know, and I really don't believe that any of the other East Side cities are going to have other projects that just sort of jump out at us. Oh, this is a regional project. I think mostly you're going to see, oh, we need a widening on the Manning Avenue here. Sanger wants to, I need to widen Academy here. That kind of thing. And again, well, if that's really, someone argue, oh, that's a Sanger issue or that's a Reedley issue, and just as they may argue that your project is a Selma issue, but that's where it gets into the packaging and the degree you can bring in the regional park and the state highways and create this vibe that, hey, wait a minute, this in fact is a regional project. It's better than that, a simple widening over here on Reedley, right? That kind of thing. There's a bit of creative marketing sales to kind of go into this a little bit, right? And that's just the way it is. I've seen a lot of good projects
that's the way to do it.
prepared by engineers, right, who provided all the black and white. It was a solid project, but they didn't have kind of the flowery narrative, and they didn't get the traction that arguably they might have. So anyway,
and to go back to staff, we're having this discussion today, and I want to say thank you very much to everyone who came today, and also to our staff for all this hard work of putting this report together and listening during our last meeting in 2020 to get this. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for your follow-up. Are you looking for direction from council to point you in a direction of a project that you would then move forward with a feasibility study for? Is that what staff is looking for out of this and in the near term?
Well, let me go ahead and take you to the conclusion of our presentation.
Okay.
We'll kind of answer that.
I do have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Sorry. I did have a question for Tony. You did mention that there were not, or no one from Selma was represented. Is that including Gateway didn't represent Selma?
Yeah, Joey Daggett was identified, right? He's your consulting engineer. He's with Gateway, and he did not participate.
Okay. And so we do also have, we do have a community development director. So I don't know, Teresa, maybe we can put him on these meetings, or if, council can attend, I would like to attend. I would like to know when those meetings are so that I can be there.
So my understanding that it's a staff workshop, and we do have an alternate already designated.
Okay.
So we did not know that Mr. Daggett couldn't make it. So otherwise we would have had our alternate there, which is Isaac Moreno. He oversees their contract. But we will make sure that we are at these. And I know Isaac made it very clear how important they are to be in attendance at. So we all think this is one of our top priorities, and we want to definitely bring our projects forward for the next opportunity with Measure C.
And perhaps we could get a report on future meetings, on those
Mhm.
measure meetings, what they talked
Absolutely.
about and how we're doing.
Yeah, we can provide.
Yeah,
During,
definitely we
during
can provide
council
that
reports.
report during my discussion at the end of our council meetings. So I can definitely take care of that. And again, I have identified myself as the alternate, and I did stress to our consultants that Measure C is an important measure that is coming to fruition that we all feel, and I think we've all discussed that we really didn't get heavily involved in. We kind of missed that bus. So I don't want to see that happen to us again, and I definitely will make sure that somebody is at that meeting. And so you're all aware that this meeting that's kind of the starting point of what Measure C looks like. It isn't a technical meeting. So similar to what you see at the COG, you have your TAC and your PAC. So this is more of an engineer basis and getting that lines so that I can't sit into those organizational meetings and get that done. So can our consultants. So I definitely will make sure.
I see you back there. We're just going to go through our staff report and then we're going to get to your comments after that. Okay, to your input. So we're gonna get to you.
So yeah, even if multiple people got to show up, we will definitely have a presence there. I guarantee that.
Okay, thank you. We definitely need that.
Is there any further questions? Okay. To kind of conclude our presentation, I think we heard a lot of things today. Most of the overall objectives that I think were key takeaways are timing, studies that are next steps potentially, and when things should be done to kind of coincide with funding sources and things of that nature. So one of the next steps is the staff's recommending at this time. It's kind of going to change from what we discussed through this conversation. So I think that's good. We kind of worked through this process to add and collaborate with our partners. Feasibility study for 99 and South Route 99 interchange, our Floral, I mean. So that kind of morphed a little bit through this conversation as more of a mini study. And I think, again, the key takeaway for Floral Avenue is we really haven't assessed what does that look like? What does that fix or potential fix or near term or future term look like? So I think that is a great next step for us to work with our partners to come together, because I definitely with Caltrans as well, because that is their intersection point and how they overall have their rubric and what they work with and like to see there. So we'll definitely try to look at that and kind of build into that model. What does Stillman look like into that model as well? Given how we're paring it down, we'll have to discuss a little bit more on what that looks like. But I think, again, we'll have that conversation. Again, with the recommendations for Dinuba Avenue, you heard a lot of different topics on how that works and how it impacts us, right? The next step for that process, since you had a feasibility study, would be the PID, potentially. So that PID potentially could be a lot of money. And again, when we're talking $200 to $300 potentially, I'm just throwing that number out there. We haven't, I'm sorry, $200 to $300,000. So, I mean, that's a great deal of money of investment for a report that potentially could become stale. So you really have to get your ducks in a row. And as they can continue to say, pick the projects that you want to move forward, because as you go through these steps, these next steps, it gets more expensive, right? Design gets more expensive. These studies get more expensive because, again, as they say, you're high level and then you just kind of come down and hone it all through. So you really got to get into that conversation with staff and as well council. What direction do we want to see the city going? So we can really discuss that and have an open forum like we are today.
Plus also time is of the essence, you know, that measure is going to get voted on and it could be accelerated to 2024 instead of 2026, which will be here before we know it. So we need to establish that direction, I think.
Correct. So some of the
Mayor, if everything goes according to plan, it will go to the ballot in 2022.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
So that's why, my emphasis on let's find out what.
Yeah, that really accelerates things right there.
Get it in the competition.
Thank you for that, Tony. Thank you for that cold splash of cold water in our face and a reminder.
Definitely, that really makes it clear that the priority is to figure out and shape these projects, regional projects, so that we have really clear identity of what we're bringing forward for Measure C.
And the best way to do that is put our efforts in the direction of what is realistic and will generate the maximal return, I believe, and solve the biggest problem that we have.
And again, I think one of the biggest key takeaways too is you talk about regional versus local. Regional projects, you really get a good push I'll give a good example to you. We received a FEMA grant for the fire department, and the reason it was a very heavy funded project. It was close to $200,000, heavily competitive, but we actually consolidated with another fire department and actually went into that grant process together to make it more competitive. So doing those things during this process does make it more enticing for the people that are scoring these overall projects. So you really want to look at that as well to make sure that we gauge what we're looking at and how it fits into these overall funding mechanisms, because you have multiple organizations going after the same pot of money, just like a normal grant would be.
And I think the city manager made a good point earlier. Regional is what gets funded. It has to be regional. It has to be sold. And to do that, it has to be marketed effectively too. You know, not just the engineering, but also the need, tell the story, make it part of the narrative when the city's going for that funding.
Right.
All right.
So maybe potential next steps for Dinuba Overpass when we first started assessing this, look at maybe a grant or something, or a developer funding for those next steps. Again, we really need to define what our next steps would be as far as we march forward. But again, just kind of throwing that out there as far as part of the discussion for staff recommendations. And then I think the next step as well to look at from an overall aspect of the city, updating our development impact study. Our development impact study is now 6 years old. Standardly, you actually like to refresh those every year. 10 years is, I'm sorry, 5 years. So we're now in the 6th year, not necessarily a bad thing, just good recommendation and good practice is 5 years. You can go out to 10, but 5 years is a good rule of thumb. So you can assess some of these intersections a little bit more, get that stuff current, look at what we are now growing and how we're growing forward. So it just really kind of develops our fee structures for the future years. So that kind of concludes my presentation. Is there any further questions before we move on from council?
Any questions from council? Okay. Are we ready for, okay, with that, thank you to our guests for waiting patiently here. Would you like to have any input, starting with Mr. Titelian? Thank you. Please come to the podium and speak into the mic.
Thank you for giving me notice of today's meeting. Forgive my Friday casual dress. I have a couple questions. Mr. Boren mentioned packaging and establishing a regional status. And I've had conversations with the city manager of late, and we have adjacent to the park, it hasn't been mentioned, but we have laid out a plan that would also facilitate a regional center. And sometimes delay can be a hidden blessing. And if you think about it, with all the years that have passed and the discussion regarding the interchange and Stillman Avenue and other improvements that are needed. I've also had a recent discussion with a friend regarding bonding. And my question is, what is the actual threshold in order to achieve regional status so that COG Caltrans and those local dollars can be combined? And my next question would be, is it possible to aggregate all of these public works projects under some bond structure, such as something, and I think the dollars may aggregate to be large enough to where an EIFD may be feasible? With my first question, can anybody discuss the particulars that would establish a regional status? And has there been any consideration of aggregating all of these projects and doing a bond that would be retired through tax increment?
Tony, can you respond to that?
Well, are we talking about Selma specific projects? Right, well, Mr. Titelian, is that what you're referring to? Kind of whether it be Dinuba, Stillman, or Floral improvements, whatever, Selma packaging those and then Selma pursuing bond funding to make it happen? Or are you talking about at the COG?
Well, in all candor, I'm not an expert on the technical aspects of which you have to consider all the time, but it seems to me that for example, Dinuba Avenue to the east of 99, you have the Amberwood project, the Raven project, and probably others that I'm not aware of. And to my knowledge, those can be or are near ready to go. On the west side of the freeway, there's discussions of a regional park, a regional shopping center. And there are other projects that I've heard that honestly, I don't know the particulars of, but if you take the Dinuba, the Floral, the Stillman Avenue, you take infrastructure, sewer, water, the question is, can you aggregate that and do so by correlating the projects, the timing of such projects, and when that increment would come into play? Or is there some other mechanism by which the city can generate dollars to make these projects happen?
Well, the city, the kind of the traditional way that the cities contribute their portion to these large regional projects is they have a development impact fee, right? And that gets combined with Measure C monies. There may be some state money involved, some grant money, federal grant money, all the funding sources sort of get added up. But in terms of bonding for these Selma specific projects, I think that would probably be a city council determination. And, I don't know what Selma's bonding capacity might be. I can tell you this, that in the overall world of transportation at the moment, there's a recognition that money is very cheap, right? And again, we talked about the sooner that you can deliver these projects, the cheaper they will be. So there is arguably a rationale for the benefits of bonding when you have a very low interest environment. So again, that's kind of a macro transportation issue. And again, when you're talking about projects that are $100, $200 million, 1%, 2%, 3% is significant savings. And so, those are things that have to be taken into consideration.
Thank you.
One point, I'm sorry to jump in here. You did mention an EIFD and the functionality of what that looks like. Just so council's aware, at this time, we don't have a letter of completion for our successor agency. So we're unable to actually develop an EIFD at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chatelian.
Good afternoon, council, staff members. My name is Kevin Murray. I'm representing Mr. Dwight Nelson today. He was unable to make it because of a medical issue that he had last week.
I hope he's okay. Give him all our best.
Absolutely, I will. I know he appreciates it. And thanks for inviting us. Thanks for allowing us to attend here. Sitting and listening to the statements made by everybody in the room regarding the development process and the strain that exists on Floral Avenue, and kind of seems like that thing's not getting better. We recognize that's not getting better. And we're here to try and determine what the city should prioritize as far as traffic flow and alleviating traffic flow from those areas. What I haven't heard much of today was, what is the development that we're looking for? What kind of development is the city prioritizing to say, business-wise for the area? Obviously, our concerns are local, but we have a regional consideration that we want to pay attention to. And I think we have an opportunity, specifically in Selma, because we have Highway 43, Caltrans Highway, and a major thorough business that comes through. I think the latest numbers I heard were upwards of 5,000 plus vehicles per day traverse. So I see that as a huge opportunity to package a regional request when we go to Caltrans. And I think we can stand on some of the shoulders of the original general plan that Mr. Nelson has referenced several times from many years ago, that Stillman provides that opportunity. And we have a bit of a head start with Stillman at that intersection because of the turn lanes that exist there and the volume that it was planned for originally. So I just wanted to make one point, and that is to urge the council to keep that under consideration, that what development happens in that area, and as it seems it can only be west and northwest, west side of 99, that be a major consideration of our priorities. That, all right, what do we put there? And I know Mr. Nelson has mentioned box stores in the past, and those seem to have a regional attraction. So again, I see Highway 43 as an opportunity. I see Stillman as an opportunity short term. Area there's land there. You guys have all been out there. I know that point, and make sure hires consider. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Kevin. Do we have anyone on the line who would like to comment on today's presentation?
I do believe I see Mr. Josan. And Mr. Josan, did you have comments for council?
Yes, thank you very much. I was listening to the conversation from all guests as well as the city council. My question is, has there been any consideration of future for the Nebraska and my project on 43 and Nebraska?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Jason?
The question is, what is the
Mr. Jason,
council's direction or the staff thinking about the development project that we have proposed along southwest of Nebraska and Highland Avenue or 43?
If I may, Mr.
Manager.
Mayor and members of council. So we have been meeting with Josan, Mr. Baldiv and his partner, Floyd Hinesley, on their project. And Kira, if you might be able to share what we do have existing as far as zoning and the traffic element, the circulation element, those do designate what is planned and adopted for the city. There may be, and maybe Kira can better explain the potential changes that this development would bring as far as expanding any road and changing any zones.
Thank you, Teresa. I would need to pull up a little bit of a summary that I have, but it's going to take me a couple minutes. So this project it's on the southwest corner of Highland and Nebraska. It does involve general plan amendments, pre-zoning, annexation, and with that comes CEQA review. So this project, although we do have an application in process, we haven't begun the environmental review for this project yet, and that's our first step. So our first step in order to move this project forward is going to be a CEQA review. I did speak with the applicant's, what is he called? An agent, Dirk Puschel. He is an entitlements agent, so he's helping this project through the entitlement process, and they are working with an environmental firm to get this project moving. The biggest hindrance we have at this moment is the new laws under CEQA to review projects for vehicle miles traveled, so VMTs is the talk, and that is at this point brand new, and no one in the valley has figured out how to mitigate those impacts. So that is where our holdup is on that project.
Well,
there would be, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, thank you for the update. That is, and I did talk to Mr. Baldiv about, this, we were focusing on this workshop primarily on areas north of Rose, south of Dinuba, west of the freeway. This project doesn't fall within the area, but absolutely important to keep in mind and how it is all interconnected. We can certainly, it sounds like this is going to be coming forward as they continue to go through the entitlement process, and council will be hearing it at some point in the future once the planning process gets there.
Yeah, Mr. Baldiv, that is That's correct. And in terms of your project, I mean, today's talk is not about it specifically, but it certainly affects your project and really any development in Selma, because this is about traffic circulation, and you're seeing conditions changing because of kind of the uprise and the explosion in development in Selma. And we on the council and staff really have to take account of that growth responsibly and plan for those additional impacts on the roads. And that's what we're doing today. So please stay tuned and stay in touch with the city as the city fleshes out these plans for the future, especially regarding Floral and Dinuba, and to some extent Stillman. So thank you for your call today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Do we have anyone else on the line?
Just as a reminder, if you would like to speak, please use *9 to raise your hand and we'll select you from the meeting queue. Also press *6 to unmute and mute yourself. At this point, I do not see any other comments.
Okay, thank you. We'll bring that back to council now as we wrap this up. Does anyone on council like to provide us with any parting remarks today?
I'll start.
I'd just like to say thank
go
you
ahead.
to everyone coming, and wish hopefully we could start getting our. We as a council need to really focus on what our major project is, and I'm leaving this workshop thanking Caltrans, thanking Tony for coming in, but at the same time, we as a council need to take our own leadership, and we need to figure out what our project's going to be. But I take this meeting actually a little surprised that one of our staff members didn't attend the last meeting. So we need to make sure that if we want to be talking about this, we need to make sure our staff's understanding that the importance of this project, of what we want to do. So, but again, thank you for everyone coming, and have a nice Friday.
I'd like to say, I think, first of all, I kind of want to echo a few things as well. In regards to our staff, we definitely need to put our priorities in line. What's going to be our first priority, second, of course, we need a feasibility study. What's our major project at this time? Where is it growing? This is where we have to look at. We don't want to pay for a feasibility study that is going to just stay stale, because that's not what we want to do. I mean, we have to use every dollar that we can. Then we have to also look at, is any of this, can we qualify for a grant? Can we, and if we can we utilize our grant writers, help us out? We pay them every month. We kind of have to start initiating and not losing the boat. We have to come up with a project, a plan, and not miss the boat, So I just feel that if we can stay on top, and I know that I've stressed this so much, our spreadsheets, what's the priority? Let's stick on our priorities. We don't need to look at those that, hey, they may be a possibility. No, let's kind of move on from what we have right now, what we have going on now, and is going to bring revenue to our city. Again, I want to echo about our meeting, definitely, I don't want to kind of keep beating that, but we got to stay on on top of these meetings. This Measure C is crucial for our city, and we can't lose that, opportunity, because this is funding that if we can put this regional plan together, and they're going to look at Selma and say, Selma came in with the strongest plan, why wouldn't we want to not get those fundings? We just have to come up with a good plan and utilize the staff, the people that are the experts to get us there. And then other than that, stay focused. We got to stay, everybody's got to stay on the same page so that we're not losing, oh, we forgot about this plan. We kind of all have to stay on that same page. So other than that, I think it's just, like you said, bringing it to council, communicating so that we know what's going on.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Yes, I also like to thank staff for this meeting. I know my husband and I have actually talked about that whole Floral exit many times. And we always say that Stillman needs to be open, that road right out of Walmart, that needs to be open and connect to Stillman. So I'm really glad to see, that we're moving forward. And I echo both Councilmember Guerra and Councilmember Trujillo that, yeah, we need priorities and we need to stick to them if we want to grow and we want to bring more businesses. And, we're going to have a park here in 24. And that's going to open up a lot of, other developments. I do feel that we can tie the regional aspect to it because we are the central, we're the center point of California, basically. And so we have we have two major arteries in our city. We have 43 and we have 99, and those are connecting to many areas. And so we do need to open up Dinuba so that we connect the east and the west. And so I think that we can, connect those and make those that regional connection. So I thank you guys for everyone, because a little bit of this was a little bit overwhelming because this is my first meeting talking about, traffic or this type of topic. But, I'm here to learn. I'm here to absorb everything. I'm here to, put in what I'm thinking, as a resident, as a council member, as the voice of Selma that I was voted to be. So I really thank you so much for all the information.
Yes, I would like to say the same thing. Thanks staff for putting the report on and all the guests coming in. And it's right. This is my first round on this area too, and it's been very educational. And hopefully, and I feel really good about the people around, the staff and everybody. Whenever there's a question, they're always open to say, ask it. So also thank you for the guests from elsewhere. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And then just to wrap it up on my part, what I heard today after sitting through a few of these meetings the last few years, it's still overwhelming to me too. After 8 years, there's just a lot to take in and a lot to act on. And as a council, our staff is depending on us. They're very able to get these things done and do the research and bring the alternatives to us, but it's up to us as a council to decide on that direction and which one. And what I heard pretty clearly today was time's a wasting on the Measure C. And not only do we want to make sure that we have city representation at every single meeting, I think staff is looking to us also to decide on a direction or on a particular project. I also heard from Mike Navarro today from Caltrans very clearly that there is some Caltrans funding to do that study on Floral, and that there might be some Council of Governments money as well from the Executive Director, Tony Boren. Those are two consummate professionals that we heard from today, and they didn't say that for no reason. There's a resource there. And I think as Council Member Mendoza Navarro said, Floral is a gaping problem. It just from a common sense standpoint, it's been a problem ever since, gosh, I can remember. And it's only going to get worse as the park comes in, as this development continues to expand, along with the Selma Grove, the commercial area that's coming in. So this is the time to make these decisions. It's very important. It also affects the impact fees that the developers participate in. So it's really important to have these traffic studies down and to update those to do that development impact fee study, because those are going to be a major source for the city funding to mitigate those impacts and to take account of all the growth that's coming. Staff, it sounds like, Caltrans is willing to come pony up at the table, as well as COG, for that study for Floral, so that we can do our job as the council to make, decisions based on the greatest amount of information possible. And with that, I will wish everybody a good weekend, and we will, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.